Our lecture is on nutrition prior to pregnancy. And we talked about a few issues about, and basically about, maintaining fertility. And then we get into what are particular nutrients that matter. And so to relax a moment and to put this in perspective, we, to be pregnant and maintain a healthful pregnancy, all the nutrients are involved. It's the same to be a living organism. If you want to live forever, you need all your essential nutrients, right? So as I've talked about before, what I do for these particular topics is hone in on the nutrients that are likely to become a problem, either because of normal dietary restrictions in the United States or just our normal bad diet. So for prior to pregnancy, I have pulled out these 5 nutrients to talk about. These are also important in pregnancy. When we talk about pregnancy, I'll just show you, here's recommendations for these because we've already talked about them, and we'll pull in a few more nutrients that become more vital during the actual pregnancy. So for this case, for prior to pregnancy, folic acid, iron, iodine, choline, and omega-3 fats warrant careful consideration prior to conception. Okay, so just to be perspective, so there's a heading slide for each of these nutrients to try to keep it clear, and so we'll go from there. So folic acid, and I just have one comment here. I have asparagus here because folic acid, asparagus is a good source, and we'll go over other good sources, and this is a really good way for you to also renew what you know about nutrients and nutrient requirements and their functionality. So I know you have this in your introductory course. In some cases, you might have it in physiology, but this is another way to pull back through information you've already had and help cement it in your understanding. Okay, so folic acid is critical for prior to pregnancy, and I hope all of you know this because there's been a pretty good campaign over the past decade or 2 decades to inform women that folic acid nutrition can have a large effect on the outcome of the infant. So this is one of those slides that some of you are going to go, thank you so much for putting structures in. And some people are going to think, why do we have to look at this? So everybody has their penchant, right? And I get both comments from groups of students. So I try to do a little bit of both. So what is folic acid? And I want to differentiate here between folic acid and folate. All right. They're really the same nutrient, they're just in slightly different form, chemical form. And I will not ask you how to draw folic acid or even tell me the pieces of it, okay? What I do want you to look at is a general concept of the structure. Folic acid as opposed to folate, folic acid is the form found in supplements. So if you look at if you eat a fortified cereal, folic acid is on the label. If you take a prenatal vitamin, folic acid is on the label. If you eat spinach, you're eating folate, which is a food form of folic acid. So I'm going to differentiate between the supplemental form here and on the next slide, the food form. So I put here these crayon representation because this is how I think, and this helps me a lot. So here's this ring system here. And then here's the structure here. And then this is glutamate. That's an amino acid. And so folic acid in the pills that you might take look like this. They have one, notice the word mono. Mono means one. So folic acid in supplemental form looks like this. And there's one glutamate on the end of it. Okay, so if you look at folate, now notice the top here. So if you go back here, this was what is folic acid. The next slide is what is folate. Now they're the same thing, but they're slightly different, right? They have the same functionality, but they're slightly different. So here's the chemical structure, except I left out the chemistry. I'm just showing you that block picture. So this is there may be a little bit of differences here, but basically this is the same that you saw with folic acid. But what do you see that's different about glutamate? Somebody answer.
Instead of one glutamate, there's multiple.
That's it. Okay, so if you go back to folic acid, there's monoglutamate. Folic acid's monoglutamate. If you move forward, folate, which is found in food like spinach and asparagus and all these things we're going to talk about, has a chain of glutamate residues. And so that's why it's called polyglutamate. Now, why does that matter? Well, it affects absorption, and that's okay. Just because a nutrient isn't absorbed that well doesn't mean it's not an important nutrient, right? An important source of that. It just affects us. So I just want you to understand that pure folic acid in the pill is highly bioavailable. And then food, if you get all your folate from food, you absorb about 50% of it because it's a little more work and there's a little more shenanigans involved in taking off all these glutamates and using folate for what it does. And then here's a combination, the absorption rate is in the middle. What I want to tell you here is don't worry about it. I want you to know this because people are going to ask you this as a professional. They're going to say, well, what's the difference? And you need to know the difference. But the requirements now combine these issues of absorption to where we don't have to know everything on the planet about it. So if you look at the bottom, labels and recommendations are reported as dietary folate equivalents, or DFE. Have any of you seen these in any of your classwork before? This is the kind of detail that you might not remember, quite frankly. Okay, it's cool. That's why we're talking about it, right? Education. So, but if you look at labels, they don't say micrograms of folic acid or micrograms of folate. They say dietary folate equivalents, DFE. And what that does, it takes into consideration these differences, okay? So the consumer does not need to worry about it, okay? So all the requirements are based on DFE, and it considers that the absorption rate is different from all these forms, okay?
There was a question in the comments on what are the problem nutrients for pregnancy.
Okay, so we're talking prior to pregnancy now. So the next lecture is pregnancy, and then I'm gonna bear down really well on that. So because this is prior to pregnancy, this has to do with preconception and maximizing health for fertility. Not that this is all that women do. Okay, so then when we get to, trust me, okay, so when we get to pregnancy, I'll give you these nutrients will be on there too, but there'll be a few more that matter during consumption that matters during pregnancy as well. Does that work?
Dr. Kershaw, I have a question.
Yeah.
Would you recommend that prior to pregnancy to just take vitamins, or would you recommend like both? I guess probably just taking the vitamins over.
Okay, so that's such a good question. And so this, because we haven't done this yet together so much, these lectures are all designed to give you background and then give you recommendations. So right now I'm going through the background part so you understand the difference. And then I'm going to talk about food sources and recommend specific recommended intake. So I'm getting there. So it's my story, right? So I start out with the story. So here's the nutrient, here's what it is. What are the terminology about it? What do we know? Why does it matter? And then what do we do?
Okay, cool.
Okay, so hang in there. If I don't get to it when we're done with folate, then pop in again. Okay. All right. All right, so how does folic acid work? This is background too, but there's a couple of things I want you to know about it. Now, many of you are not in the dietetics tract. Many of you are in the dietetics tract for our program. Those of you that are in the dietetics track are going to go on and take biochemical nutrition, which I taught for like 20 years. So I pretty much know what's in there. And so, and genetics, some of you may be in genetics now or later, but we need to know a little bit more about these nutrients for those classes. So provide a little bit of background for you to put your head around why folic acid matters. And right when you covered in genetics or biochemical nutrition, you'll pull in the same information and think about it again. So why do we care? I'm going to show how it works and then why it matters so much prior to pregnancy, okay? So I know there's a bit of jargon here, but I try to cut back on it. So folic acid is part of coenzymes that mediate the transfer of methyl groups. This is a methyl group right here. A methyl is CH3, so CH3 right here. And this will be attached to a variety of molecules in the body. And we use methyl groups to like turn on and turn off genes and activate enzymes. It's such a critical thing to transfer a methyl group. Okay, cause the brain stem to close. These methyl groups really matter. So folic acid is like this what's the right thing? I'm really bad at sports, but let's say a person playing baseball needs to throw the methyl group to the right place for things to happen. Folic acid's job is that. Okay, so it's a major thing. So methyl groups, the CHG, and methylene groups is just, there's a double bond in there, it's the same kind of thing. And here's the critical piece. There's two balls that are the same as what this says here. We need folic acid to make DNA. Now think about that. If you're making it a human, you probably need to make DNA, right? You got to make a lot of cells. And then DNA methylation. And this is required for all this regulation of metabolism that makes us the healthy individuals that we are. So these are general terms here. I have the coenzyme forms written here for you. What I will ask you is look for recognition, but you never need to be able to write it for this class. So I want you to know the two primary functions we're talking about and be able to pull out the name of the coenzyme. If there's a multiple choice question, just be able to pull it out, but you don't have to write it. And I do this to help prepare you for your future classes as well. So what does it do? We need folic acid to make cells, make it, for ourselves and so forth. So now we're getting into the story about why does it matter so much prior to pregnancy? It is critical for closing of the neural tube. And I assume many of you have heard the term neural tube defects before. An example is spina bifida, right? And this is a child with spina bifida. And here's a cross section to see what happened. This was during development. This was the notochord that was supposed to be closed all the way here, but instead it didn't close. And so there was some of the cerebral spinal fluid and so forth is packaged outside of the spinal column. So this child has spina bifida. This is what is called a neural tube defect. And I'll show you a picture of the neural tube in the next slide or so. So now we need folic acid so that we close this neural tube during development so this doesn't happen. Look when we need to have good folic acid nutrition. This should hit you profoundly. Okay, think about it. Let's say you conceive halfway through a period. So period starts stage 1. 2 weeks later, you have sex, you conceive within a few days. 17 days after that, this major part of the anatomy may become messed up if your nutritional status isn't good. 17 days, you know how cool, this is right around, people don't know, they're right around going, gee, is my period late or not? Right, so this is real soon. And the whole point is this happens so quickly that we need to make sure that dietary status is good and all women who could conceive, their folic acid status is good. So that's where I'll get into the recommendations. So again, I'm trying to explain the story here. So really soon, in order to avoid this, we need to have enough folic acid for this closure of the notochord. So why does this matter? Because 1/2 of US pregnancies are not planned. So if you think about it, let's say it's a planned pregnancy and you have lots of privilege and understanding, education, and maybe even a well-woman care, and you can talk to a healthcare professional and say, considering pregnancy, they can help set you up, right? That's what a pro-healthcare environment's like. And so if that's the case, if you're planning, in particular planning, then your nutritional status would be ideal. So if pregnancy happens, then folic acid is not a problem, right? Because your diet and so forth has been okay. But what happens is pregnancy hits in all walks of life. And not everybody is thinking, wow, this is when I want to start my family, or thinking at all about this. They're living their own lives. So this is why this public health message on folic acid is so important. So 3,000 women a year in the United States deliver babies with neural tube defects. Now, there's a variety. I didn't go into it because I think it's too much, but there's a variety of, some people can have spina bifida where they just have a little tiny bump right here, and they can even fix it, and it doesn't affect their life at all. But if they're born this way, oftentimes they have problems with bladder control as adults, have trouble walking. There can be, the range of how this affects their lives can be really different. So the more we can do to prevent it, the better. Now, one thing that's not a really nutrition point is that some people, if spina bifida is detected in utero, I believe that there are surgeries now where they can go in and try to fix it, you know, transabdominal, you know, intrauterine surgeries, but that's beyond the scope of this class. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Question about storage of folic acid. Is it something that you can build up in your body so that it doesn't flow? No.
We require daily intake of it. Thank you. That's such a good question. Thank you. Okay, so this is a diagram to just show you again that I wanted to enforce how soon this happens when the notochord closes. So this is one of these diagrams of the notochord and what's going on. So this is just how it forms. Okay, so it forms a tube and then so on, and then you've got, this is where your spinal cord is going to happen. This happens really fast. And the notochord closes after like 30 days. Remember I said like 17 to 30 days, so it happens really fast. So this just kind of gives you a visual for taking a look at that. It's kind of startling. And this is my last reminder, and you've seen this stuff before. I just want to bring it up again. Remember, conception happens here, you know, and best case scenario, you want to get pregnant, you can check, you can do an early pregnancy test that may work around 8 days, maybe not. You're paying attention, you may know that a pregnancy happens, so you can happen really fast. If people are not thinking along these lines or don't realize, you know, birth control methods can fail too, right? And so it can happen before you know it. That's the point of that. I'll probably beat that to death. So why do we have people with poor folic acid status? Well, one is diet. We'll talk about this some more. And this is obviously our umbrella, but it's important for people to understand that that not everybody's the same. Some groups of individuals are at higher risk for having children with neural tube defects than others. And this pretty much has to do with genetics. Okay, so some individuals have and I don't know if you've learned this language yet. If you're in genetics, you will have learned this language, but so it's a growth thing. Single nucleotide polymorphism, SNP. What that is, it's one change in the DNA code, one little tiny change. So if you have two genes for a particular trait and they're identical, or one has one little tiny problem with it, okay, that's a single nucleotide polymorphism. It means the gene doesn't work, doesn't express the right protein exactly. So the enzyme is not as functional as you'd want it to be. So one of these enzymes that's important for folic acid function isn't going to work as well. These guys need extra amounts of folic acid, which I'll talk about. Okay, so if you don't have bad genes, normal recommendations are fine, but some people need more. Now, who is the highest group in the United States? Hispanic women are more likely to have this SNP than other groups. That doesn't mean that they all have it, or you know, nobody else does. It's just sort of a generic way of taking a look at it. So what do we recommend? This gets back to your question way long time ago. You said, so what are we supposed to do? So this is my story. I like to build up the story and then tell you what we need to do. So what do? So I have these boxes for nutrients that we talk about in prior to pregnancy and pregnancy. And this is in DFE, which we've talked about. And for not pregnant, it's 400 DFE per day. Pregnant, 600, and lactation goes down. So I have these little boxes everywhere for when we talk about nutrients. So because this is such a serious issue, we have specific recommendations to talk about. And I promise you, this is very much going to be test material. This is something you should always have in the tip of your tongue as you walk around as a professional. Prior to pregnancy, all women of childbearing age, that's basically, and I don't even want to start here, but teenager through 50 and 45 or something, but women can oddly conceive for a long period of time. So number one, consume a folate-rich diet. The next slide is going to talk about where you find folate. And take a supplement every day. If you are an individual or partnered up with an individual that could become pregnant because they're fertile, these are their recommendations. Okay, so there's more specifics about this to prevent, because look at the timeline, right? It's so quick. So you can't wait until you go, I'm pregnant, I need to take folic acid. You need to plan, your status needs to be better before you start out. And this requires daily intake. So in particular, at least 1 month prior to conception, take the 400 DFE, and it's safe up to 1,000. Okay. And if you're one of those individuals that have history of delivering a child with a neural tube defect, physicians do sometimes recommend a lot more than the UL for folate. So people that have had a child with neural tube defects, they may be recommended to take several times the requirement, 10 times the requirement. This is a medical call, not a dietitian call, unless you're working with healthcare professionals as part of a team. So during pregnancy, women take 600 DFE. Okay, so I will repeat, when I get to pregnancy, I'm going to repeat this little table right here, but not go into all the detail that we've gone into about folic acid. You're already going to know. So where do you get it? Here's some food and there's some pills. So where are you actually supposed to get this folate? Okay, I apologize. I didn't mean to hiss that twice. Here's some examples. Now, folate's found all over the place. Okay, so, and these are DFEs, so it gives you kind of an idea.
Somebody would like a reminder what dietary or DFE stands for.
Dietary folate equivalence. It means it's a unit we use to talk about folate or folic acid that takes into consideration the absorption of supplemental forms and food forms. So we kind of combined them. And so now when you look at a table and it says how much DFE, it means how much you're going to absorb, basically, absorbable folic acid. So these are
but is that still in, it's milligrams, right? Like the DFE
yes.
is the, okay, got it.
But it's related to folate. But I just don't want to go into that because I can spend like 30 minutes talking about equivalencies and calculations. So I'm trying to not do that because I want to stay focused here, but you're absolutely right. Okay, DFE, that's absolutely right. And if you've done nutrient analysis studies before, it'll say DFE now, but it might have also said micrograms. Okay. All right, so remember our number we're looking for is 400 from food, right? Ballpark. So look here at your list, and this is just a list of things I might eat. So there's a big long list that you can find, but just to give you an idea, like black-eyed peas are high in folic acid and DFEs. Spinach is high. Now this is boiled, and hopefully you have better taste buds than that, but still. But these fortified cereals can do it too. So the question before was, well, should I just take a supplement? Well, you know what? If people's diets are not good, yeah, take a multiple. If women are in college or in that age group and it's possible that they could conceive, a daily multiple vitamin mineral supplement will help smooth out all these concerns. Now, I'm not pro supplement I don't take supplements, but I'm not reproductive, but I'm very pro food being a source of nutrition. However, because of this one issue, the Band-Aid approach of a multiple is not a bad idea. You can either do that or eat a fortified cereal. Or if you eat a healthful diet, which I know a lot of you do, you're getting plenty of it. You're getting plenty of folic acid, don't worry about it. So, but you can understand if you're talking to parents, there's a lot of questions you have to ask before you know if they're getting enough folic acid, right? You need to ask, what is your diet normally like? And so there's a lot. Now, the reason these fortified cereals and pasta have folic acid is because in 1998, we started adding folic acid to fortified flours and so forth. Why do you think we did that as a nation? We had iodine to salt, right? Flour has iron, thiamine, riboflavin, niacin. And then in 1998, for a long time, and then we said, you know, let's put folic acid in it. Why do you think we did that?
Was there a higher case of neural tube defects happening?
Yeah, it was a public health initiative to try to improve the health of the entire nation by adding folic acid to flour products. And what's really sad is that you can get plenty of folate or DFEs from food if you eat the diet that we're all trained to eat. But if you eat the American diet, you know, and all the things, sure, the flour, okay, let's do this before flour is fortified. Let's say you ate the American diet, so you eat pizza for lunch and whatever for dinner and hamburgers and whatever. If the flour is not fortified and you're eating that American diet, your folic acid status can be really low. So they added it to flour, white flour, because people eat white flour. So it's a supplement. It's interesting. It's a good idea, but it's interesting that we need to do it because we eat so much white bread from processed foods. It's not funny, but anyway. Okay, that's it for folic acid comments. And is there anything quick about folic acid before I move on to iron?
I have a question about the like amount of folic acid in eggs.
Okay, I've got 22 here.
So is it different from when it's a boiled egg versus, like, I guess if you want to say like a fried egg or a poached egg, like how much?
I love this question because this is what's wrong exactly with these tables, right? And so they tell you, they have to tell you how they assess it, because what's done here is big labs over a period of many years took food and ice, you know, and did chemical analysis to be able to tell you how much nutrients were in these particular foods. And so they say eggs here boiled because that's how they tested it. I'm going to guess that there may be a little difference, and this is an educated guess, but like if you fried an egg and you put it in a really hot pan, which you really shouldn't because it gets gross, you could actually cut back a little bit on the activity of the folate because of the heat. But a boiled egg is just a good ballpark figure. Kind of go this way. So if scrambled egg, it's going to be really similar. The only way you would change it is if you just really cooked it too much, and then it's, you know, not good. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I love your questions though, because they're very specific about, it helps us think about this. Does every half cup of kidney beans have exactly 46 DFE? No, it's just a ballpark. This gives you an idea about where folic acid's found. And notice there's not meat on this list. Folic acid is, you know, the word folate comes from foliage, which has to do with leaves, right? So things with leaves in them have a lot of folate. I pulled out some ideas here, or some examples here, but romaine lettuce has a lot of folate. You know, if you used to, we would make fun of romaine and go, well, if it's not spinach or something really dark, it's not hippie enough. But it turns out that lots of lettuces actually are helpful. So a variety of lettuces are good for providing folate. Okay, so done. Folate's needed to prevent neural tube defects. Please review that very carefully. This is an important take-home message from the course. So now let's look at iron. Iron is, we've talked about it before, you know how critical it is. And I have a little tagline at the bottom of each of these introductory slides. So anemia during pregnancy is common worldwide. If you just look at this food here, there may be groups of these items that you consume, but if you think about people in poverty or people eating different types of diets, they may not have all of these rich sources of iron in their diets. So let's just think about it for a bit. Why does iron matter for pregnancy? Well, if you think about your, you know, in pregnancy, basically what you're doing is growing a new person. So if you're growing an entirely new person, you're growing their, helping them develop their red blood cells, their spine, their organ systems, you know, there's the magnitude of what's going on here is not trivial. So for iron, we need to make hemoglobin from red blood cells, myoglobin, which is the oxygen carrier in the muscle, electron transport system, which, as you remember, has to do with getting energy from food, right? Getting ATP. Neurotransmitter synthesis, which has to do with function, cognitive function, and cognitive development. So for a developing fetus, iron is required, adequate iron is required for best case cognitive development. So and this is so well recognized across the globe that all the public health organizations that work with pregnant women focus on iron. WIC, for example, one of the major functions of WIC in the United States is to look at iron status, check mom for iron deficiency anemia, check the kids for iron deficiency, make sure they have adequate amounts of iron, provide foods that are rich in iron, right? So because it's so important, so really it's critical for development. This is simply showing you what anemia looks like. These are slides, right? So here's your red blood cells. If this is a normal slide of a certain amount of plasma, or not plasma, but blood, this is what it would look like. If someone's anemic, anemia can happen from a variety of reasons, but if it's iron, these cells will probably be a little bit smaller, but also there aren't enough. If you don't have enough iron, you cannot make hemoglobin and then make your red blood cells. So the red blood cell count's going to be low, the hemoglobin count's going to be low. The ability to do all the things we need iron to do is impaired. So inadequate intake can result in depleted stores. So right now, if your iron status is good, you've got stores. And maternal anemia at conception, and this is the major take-home point here. If mom is anemic at conception, this can impair the child's cognitive function. And you look at all the features that are involved with that: attention, behavior, IQ, language skills, gross motor skills. And there's other factors that I'm not putting on here because I don't want to overload you, but it can increase risk for preterm delivery and things like that. But her anemia may have a permanent effect on the child's cognitive abilities forevermore. Because of this, public health organizations worry about iron a lot, and they check women. So you can see why. During pregnancy, if you have a healthcare provider, they go in, they check, they do finger prick checks at the very least to see how iron status is.
There was a question in the comments on what myoglobin is.
Okay, so hemoglobin is the molecule found, and I always use my own, so it's silly, but hemoglobin is found in blood. It's in the red blood cells. Hemoglobin is what carries oxygen. Like when your blood goes to the lungs, you breathe in oxygen, it gets loaded with oxygen, and then it carries, those red blood cells carry it throughout the tissue and deliver oxygen where you need it. Okay, and they also pick up CO2, and when you breathe out, you're getting rid of CO2. So the hemoglobin helps you bring in oxygen, breathe out CO2. Myoglobin is in the muscle cells. So sorry, I do this better in person. Okay, so here's your blood going by. Okay, here's a muscle. Here's your blood going by. Hemoglobin's in there. Okay, red blood cells, hemoglobin's carrying oxygen. Oxygen is delivered to your cells. Myoglobin is in that cell, and that's what transport oxygen to where it's needed in the cell. Both of these molecules require iron. They have iron as part of the structure. So if someone doesn't have iron, you don't have enough, you don't make hemoglobin without it, you just don't have enough. Okay, right. So here's a recommendation slide. So I told you I'm following the same pattern. Why does it matter? What do we do about it? So for iron, not pregnant, 18 milligrams per day. Pregnant, 27, so it goes up. Lactation we'll talk about, or we've already talked about. Lactation, it goes down. Lactation often goes down. In particular, think about iron. Women need more iron than men during reproductive years. Why? Because of periods. Women lose a lot of iron every month from their periods, so their iron requirements are pretty high. And so for a woman prior to pregnancy, she needs 18 milligrams, which is much more than a man needs. And during pregnancy, the requirements go up. The UL, I'm just put this here so you understand that there is an upper limit. Remember, this is the limit past which, up to here is safe. You can take 45 milligrams a day if you want to, and that shouldn't give you any toxic effects. I just move, and then everything bounces around. Okay, so there is a UL, and that means if you've got too much iron over a long period of time, you might have negative effects. But I will tell you, for pregnant women, if they're very anemic, sometimes doctors give them high amounts of this. It's not your problem. That's a medical decision. So your problem is the DRIs, okay? So prior to pregnancy, it's 18 milligrams per day. But if she's already anemic, she should take more. And this is a medical comment, over the counter, or, if I were working with somebody, I would probably tell them to take, up to 45. Okay, the other thing is, you may remember this from intro class, but let's make sure we spell this out. Vitamin C rich foods with meals. Do you remember why? Does anybody remember why we throw in vitamin C here?
Vitamin C makes iron more bioavailable.
That's right, especially iron that is not in meat, but the iron that's found in beans and in plants and different sources. Vitamin C helps. And then also combine heme iron, which is meat, fish, and poultry, with other non-heme iron sources, beans, fruit, vegetables, and so forth. The reason, put a star by this, the reason we talk about combining is that our heme iron is always better absorbed, not only if we have vitamin C, is indicated here, but also beans, fruits, and vegetables. So if you, for example, let's say you're a Texan and you're going to make your meat chili, okay, which, that's far cry from how I eat, but let's say you make a meat, hamburger meat chili. Okay, that's got heme iron in it. That's a good source of iron. If you wanted to be a powerhouse for iron, you would have it with beans, okay, because beans have non-heme iron, and there's something in here that helps with absorption of heme iron. So, and I'm not going to go into the details of this, but so your other foods can help. So if you put beans in your chili, it's even better. And then let's say, here's your little bowl of chili here, right? And on the side, you made some salsa, fresh salsa, and it's got tomatoes and onions and so forth, and it's got natural sources of vitamin C. Those things will help you absorb the iron from the heme iron. So the recommendations are you want to get enough, but you also want to eat for iron, positive iron nutrition. Now, and then at the same time to do this, we actually limit certain things that interfere with iron absorption. And these are oxalates and spinach. Spinach. So spinach, if you look up spinach in a table and go, wow, it's got some iron in it, but it really doesn't help because spinach has oxalates that bind iron and decrease the bioavailability. Too much fiber. Let's say you're a hardcore vegan and you're trying to get good iron status, but you're eating only whole grains and beans, and so you eat, 2 cups of, a cup of quinoa and a cup of brown rice for dinner. You might interfere with absorption of iron. So moderation in all things. Tea and coffee can interfere as well. Dairy can interfere, and calcium supplements can interfere. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know that like coffee is one thing that really inhibits iron absorption, but I'm just wondering, just out of curiosity, is that like just when you're eating a meal, or is that like throughout the day, like it tapers off? Because I love coffee and I try not to drink it with meals. So like I try to eat breakfast and then wait a little bit and then have coffee instead of having my coffee with my breakfast, because I know that it can inhibit not just iron absorption, but like some other minerals as well.
Yeah.
So just curious about that.
Now, you know what? we can mostly be, unless we're anemic, we can be a little bit loosey-goosey about it. And so it's only going to matter while they're in the stomach at the same time, because it's a change, right? So where it runs into a problem is when people have a habit where they drink coffee all day or tea all day. And there are some people that do that. There may not be a norm, but some people will. Over the years, I've run into students that drink, 12 cups of coffee all day. That might interfere with absorption. But you have 1 or 2 cups in the morning, and then you eat, a variety of nutrients and foods later, then you're going to be okay. So it's kind of moderation in all things. So here's my iron table to just give you some examples of where you might find iron. And notice there's not a whole lot of milligrams in different foods, but it adds up. So during the day, the supplement is not a bad idea for somebody that's not eating a good diet. But beans, this is just an example of one kind of bean. Beans can have a lot. Now we talked about, absorption, but beans aren't going to have so much phytates. These phytates are from grains. So beans are a good source. Lentils are a good source. Tofu is a good source. So a variety of foods. What I like to draw out here is that, and notice milk has none, is that a variety of real food provides a pretty good diet. It's when you start looking at, processed foods that sometimes the amounts go low. But if you're actually, populating your diet with a variety of whole foods, it's a game changer for actual nutritional status. But if someone's eating a vegan diet and they're not getting heme, they could be at risk for iron deficiency, and in particular vegan diet. So I would actually recommend healthcare for that, or a screening. Okay, so in a perfect world, people plan their pregnancies before their pregnancy, then they get screened, they find out if they're anemic, they fix it, they start taking folic acid. That's a perfect world. Our world is not completely perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about iodine here, and then I'm going to go to the video project.
I have a quick question,
yeah.
Dr. Criswell. Is iron labeled as something else on a multivitamin? I'm looking at a bottle of multivitamins I have, and I'm not seeing it anywhere. So I'm wondering.
Sulfate.
Oh, okay. Sulfate. I see it. Thank you.
Right. It should say iron for the consumer, though. Lots of money. Okay, so the next one is iodine. There's not the stories aren't as heavy. Folic acid and iron are very heavy stories, and these are a little easier to put together. So iodine matters a lot, and this is worst case scenario over here, so I'll get to that. But we need iodine. I know you have this in physiology. We need it for thyroid hormone synthesis. And we need that for everything that we do. We need thyroid hormone to regulate metabolism, ovulate, grow cells, grow, thyroid hormone is crucial. So iodine deficiency can be serious in terms of affecting development. Now, deficiency can result in infertility. Look at this ovulation comment here. And then some women have naturally low thyroid, low thyroid or hypothyroid levels, and that can interfere with ovulation. This is worldwide. So worldwide, some pregnancies may not occur. She may be infertile because she has low thyroid hormone levels based on iodine deficiency. This is more of an international issue. Although in the United States, we eat too much salt. If it's always iodized salt, we're fine. But if you're buying hippie salts and you don't eat out and you don't eat enough, it could result in by hippie salts, I mean non-iodized salt, right? So sea salt, but it doesn't say I know iodine's added. We in the United States, we fortify salt with iodine. And so most of the salt you buy says iodized salt, which means if you use that at home, you're going to have plenty of iodine. It's just in restaurants, sometimes they'll use salt that doesn't have that addition to it. So I'm telling you a lot in one slide here. But so internationally, what happens if this could happen in the United States too, if they're iodine deficient, let's say you you didn't eat a diet with any fortified iodine, you didn't eat any seafood or like that, you know, so forth, so forth, you could have an iodine deficiency. And what happens is this is very rare in the US, but people develop a goiter, and what that is hyper growth of the thyroid gland. It gets bigger and bigger, and hyperplasia makes too many cells. And this is, you know, you're thinking, well, it's looking for iodine, but this is what happens. In hypertrophy, it grows too much. It doesn't help, but this is how mom looks if she's got iodine deficiency. Now, the sad part about this, because iodine is required so many pieces of development, an infant produced from a iodine deficient pregnancy can it's called cretinism, which is still a term that's used, can interfere with their everything, of cognitive development and the whole thing. So it's very, very serious. So in the United States, what do we recommend? Sorry, I made that yellow. I did do that. I had some thoughts here. Okay, look here. For iodine, what you want is a diet seafood, iodized salt. If your intake's low, take a supplement. Avoid foods. And I don't really have this list here, so I'm just going to tell you this because I don't think it matters so much in the United States. Across the nation, across the world, there are certain foods that interfere with the thyroid hormone. Like cabbage is an example, but you would have to eat a whole lot of cabbage, right? So some foods can interfere with the process of making thyroid hormone, but they're not important in the United States. So really, the recommendation is right here. Iodized, if you're using salt, use iodized salt.